Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric Pate here, back with another Aviation What If. So, I'm going to go ahead and put out a quick disclaimer. I'm going to do this at the beginning of every What If from now on. I'm no plane crash expert. I'm only making these What Ifs based off of information from air disasters I have watched, or air crash investigations I have watched. Now, the thing is with these What Ifs is most of the time so how they normally work is I ask the question. I ask my what if question at the beginning. Then I talk about the accident. Then we talk about some related accidents, if there were any. Then after that, we're going to, then I ask the question, no, then I tell you my prediction, and then I ask the question again. Well, sometimes I ask the question again, then tell you my prediction, so that's how I do it. So sometimes I make my prediction, then ask the question again. So anyway, enough chit chat. So what if McDonald Douglas... So today's question is, what if McDonald Douglas did something about the DC-10 cargo door after the near crash of American 96? That's the question. We're going to go ahead and talk about the aircraft in question, which is a DC-10. And if you don't know what a DC-10 is, check the description, because there's a link to my DC-10 video I made. The DC-10 just entered commercial service. If you haven't seen my 747 video, go ahead and also watch that as well. So you can probably learn a little bit more about the race for the first jumbo, because there was a race for the first jumbo between Lockheed, Boeing, and McDonald Douglas. McDonald Douglas came up with DC-10, Boeing came up with the 747, and Lockheed came up with the L-1011. And the DC-10 can sit up to about, I heard about 400 people. And luckily, when I made this Google slide, there's a way on Google Slides where you can actually make the background picture a picture from Google, and that's what I happen to choose. This is what a DC-10 looks like. I just chose a picture of a Continental DC-10. As you can see, the tail engine is on the tail, and then you got the two engines on the wings. It's kind of hard to see that third engine right there, but there's the number 1 engine, the number 2 engine, and number 3 engine. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about. So again, for this what if as well as just like the last one, we are gonna have the first accident to happen for us to make a prediction. The reason being is it's what brought down the second accident. Now, something really should have been done after the first. So yeah, American Airlines Flight 96, June the 12th of 1972, over Windsor, Canada. American 96 is on the second leg of a 3-leg flight from Los Angeles to LaGuardia. Now, back in the 70s, a lot of times it was not a surprise for a flight from LAX to New York City take some stops along the way. 96 was supposed to stop at Detroit and Buffalo before heading on to LaGuardia. Plane was just about 5 minutes into its flight, passing through 11,000 feet, and all of a sudden, there's an explosion. The cargo door blew out of the DC-10. The number I'm about to say is really important. 67 people were only on board this DC-10. That's not even a quarter. That's nearly a quarter compared to what was on the next accident. Actually, is that even a quarter compared? Probably not. It doesn't really matter, but it wasn't even a quarter compared to what was on 981, which we will discuss in just a second. The pilots then managed to land the crippled plane back in Detroit. Captain Bryce McCormick and First Officer Paige Whitney, both of them, according to air disasters, I don't know if they actually did, but they both had both of their hands on the yoke, and they were barely controlling the plane with the yoke. So what Captain McCormick did was that he used the engines instead. He used the wing-mounted engines instead to turn the crippled DC-10 back to Detroit. I think they said after an hour or so of flying, they landed safely. The plane did touch down, I believe they said at like 240 knots, which typically a plane needs to touch down. I was told typically normal landing speed of a DC-10 is about 140 knots. So they were going 100 over than what they needed to be, but they said that if they didn't, they would have completely lost control of the plane. Again, I just mentioned Captain Bryce McCormick. He was a captain of Flight 96. I will praise Captain McCormick here. McCormick. He showed complete professionalism and dedication while fighting a crippled jet back to Detroit. Passengers had some of the passengers made comments of like they wanted to hug Captain McCormick, or yeah, they said they wanted to hug Captain McCormick just because of what he did. And he was super calm when he made this announcement. In his emergency announcement, he said, well, this is according to the air disasters. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We have a small problem, but the plane's under control now. We are heading back to Detroit for an emergency landing. He didn't, and compared to another captain we talked about later on in one of my aviation what if, another aviation what if, he didn't want to scare the passengers either. Heck, one passenger said that when the cargo door blew out, pieces of metal, whatnot, did that. I mean, smacked her in the freaking face, and like her husband's like holding like her face, because she said she was bleeding, and she was actually interviewed for the air disasters, and she said that she got smacked in the face by like flying debris of the airplane, and her husband held on to her face, trying to control the bleeding. But luckily though, the Flight 96 made it back to Detroit. Let's fast forward to almost 2 years later, a year and 9 months, just about, to March the 3rd, 1974. Yeah, it's a beautiful day in Paris, France. It's a beautiful day for flying from Paris to London. And then all of a sudden, a DC-10 just all of a sudden crashes. Flying from Paris Orly Airport to London Heathrow. That plane originated in Istanbul, Turkey. That flight was Turkish Airways, Flight 981. just 29th DC-10 built, is what they said on air disasters. And there was a strike at a, and typically they said also on the air disasters. Oh, real quick, everything I say in these aviation what ifs are information I've either gathered from air disasters or research. But according to the air disaster, it said that this flight is relatively empty for this part of the flight from Paris Orly to London Heathrow. They said that part of the flight is usually empty, but there was a strike at a British airline, and a lot of people got rebooked onto Turkish 981, which caused it to be a completely full DC-10, which ended up having 346 people aboard. Like I mentioned, this was the second and final leg of Flight 981. The flight, like I said, originated in Istanbul, Turkey, flying from Istanbul to Paris to London. The plane was passing through the same altitude that Flight 96 was passing through when they lost their cargo door, which was 11,000 feet. In just less than 90 seconds, in literally less than 90 seconds, it went from a routine flight to, well, at the time, the deadliest plane crash of all time. It ended up getting surpassed by Tenerife, which happened 3 years later. Japan Air 123, which happened, I think 11 years later. I think they said it happened in 85. Oh yeah. They did because they said it was only like 2 weeks after the Air India bomb exploded on that Air India flight. And then 22 years later, when the Jakarta mid-air collision occurred. So it became the fourth deadliest crash, but it still remains the deadliest crash that did not involve a 747 either way. I will argue the Jakarta one did. Well, not Jakarta, but I can't even say that Indian name. It's in the 747 video that's in the description. But it definitely did not involve the 747. People were actually stuck out of Turkish 981 because they said that 2 rows of seats was taken when the cargo door blew out, and those people basically fell to their deaths. Little bit of the aftermath of Flight 981. It quickly spread to the family of the victims that this was not the first time something like this happened. I mentioned in the what if I made yesterday with the Silk Air accident, I mentioned that this was an American made plane. Well, while we were talking about the 737. But I mentioned that the NTSB had to get involved in that accident. The DC-10 was also a plane made here in America. Really quick, we had to get involved in their investigation too. And it quickly became known that a cargo door blew out again. And the lead investigator from the NTSB said, hey, this is not the first time something like this happened. And the investigators with the BEA said, what do you mean? What do you mean this is not the first time? And then the NTSB said, you heard about the Windsor incident? And they quickly said, yeah. This is basically Windsor all over again, but worse. Now, you know that number I told you to remember earlier? 67 people aboard Flight 96. Compared to 349, I believe that was aboard 981. 346 on 981. Now, 96. They didn't quite lose all control because they didn't really have as much weight. They still had some hydraulic control, but not a whole lot on 96. 981, they completely lost it. The only related accident I could find that was to American 96 and the Turkish incident was United 811, which occurred 14 years after 981. During a routine flight from Los Angeles to Sydney with stopovers at Honolulu and Auckland, United Airlines Flight 811, due to a design flaw, had a cargo door blew out, but it blew out in front of the plane, at the front of the plane versus the back of the plane. This one was at the front of the plane. It was very similar to what happened to the two DC-10s, and Flight 811 managed to make it back. And luckily, we only had 9 fatalities. I know 811 was a 747. I know it was a 747. But I still thought it was worth mentioning. I still think it was worth mentioning, even though 811 was a 747. I still felt like it was worth mentioning 811. So, I'll go ahead and tell you my prediction before I ask the question again. I think if McDonald Douglas did address the issue better with American 96, then I didn't think 981 would have happened. I think 981 would have made it to London. The temporary fix they had after 96 was they put a peephole on the cargo door of the DC-10. But I honestly did think, though, not everyone knew what the peephole was meant, and I do believe it. And it was written in 3 different languages, but the guy who was working Flight 981 didn't speak any of those 3 languages. So he couldn't see if the pins were locked. But the permanent solution that they came up with was, if the safety pins weren't locked, it was basically going to be impossible for them to shut the door, and it worked. But the reputation of DC-10 never recovered. There will be 2 more what ifs regarding the DC-10 as soon as I can find a couple related accidents. Really, I just need to find a couple related accidents to both of these planes to figure out, just so y'all can have a bigger idea. So let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe, comment, favorite. Be nice, cool, be awesome. Irritate, don't do hates. See you later. Totally forgot to ask you guys a question again. But what if McDonald Douglas did something about the DC-10 cargo door off the American 96?